from Greenwich Village, New York, wearing white and black trunks, weighing 146.5 pounds, ToughTony Pellone. ToughTony Pellone.
All right, you boys will keep Just like any other kid, you know, my fondest memories are just playing with my father in the park or something like that. I mean, one of my greatest memories is when my mother was in the hospital giving birth to my youngest sister. It was across the street from Columbian Presbyterian. There's like rocks there, and I can remember playing soldier with my father. And you know, although it, you know, may have lasted only for a half hour, you know, it's one of the greatest memories of my life. You know,
it was cool. It was great. You know, everybody knew who he was. He was famous, you know, and everybody respected him. You know,
if a non-boxing fan says to you, "Well, how famous was your father?" I used to say things like, well, you know, like say a second baseman for the Cubs in 1959. But a boxing fan, it's a different story. I mean, I remember being my first day at school in the first grade, and the teacher saying, after they read the names and the seating arrangements, "Are you related to Tony Pellone?" You know, and teachers, school teachers, you know.
You know, when I was a kid, I knew about all this stuff, you know, but as I got older, I met people like this guy named Sal Rappa, who was a boxing historian. He was kind enough to give me films of my father fighting.
Occasionally he'd talk about boxing. Like we were in actually a schoolyard one time, and I wanted to play catch. But he started talking about how he ran around the whole edge of the schoolyard, you know, a couple of times, telling me how you train for fighting that way. And he was retired. He used to say to me that if I ever became a fighter, he'd break my head, you know. So, you know, he thought it was not a good profession to get into.
He brought me to Gil Hodges' baseball thing they had in right near Coney Island. Well, they had a league, like a little league. I went for the tryout and I hit a ball off the wall. And he was so proud of me for doing that, you know.
I could have been only 4 years old. And my father had a guest shot on a Bob Hope special. Because what he did when he retired, he had all these connections. I mean, boxing was show business. Boxing was being a rock star in his age, in his day and age. All he had to do during the live broadcast of the Bob Hope show was run across the stage with a gun. And that was it. But he had to go rehearse all week long. And he got $500 for the whole week, which was a lot in those days. I guess it's like $5,000 by today's money. I believe he complained that there was so much waiting around, which even like professional actors who aren't fighters complain about that. There's too much waiting around. So he never pursued that.
I remember when I was about 16, 17, going down to New York City to go see Rocky Graziano, who was doing a signing. And I said, "Hey, my uncle's Tough Tony." "Oh, I loved your uncle. You know, we grew up together. We had dinner." You know, he had nothing but admiration for my uncle. Yeah. It was cool having my uncle be a #1 ranked welterweight forever. He could have been bigger than Rocky Graziano. Like, he had a lot more charm, storytelling ability. Rocky was on these shows, but Rocky didn't have the storytelling ability my uncle did.
And he got in the ring with me one day, just kidding around with me. But then he went like this here, and he went that way, right out of the ring. My buddy was a funny guy, and I met him, and we know each other so much.
Tony Pellone?
Tony Pellone, Al Panino, all those guys, and Albie Goldstein, and all those guys.
They were at the Neville Hotel, Rocky Graziano, Jake LaMotta, and my father, right? And Buddy Hackett was performing, and right before the gig, he comes out in his tuxedo by the pool. So they were like, "Hey, let's throw him in the pool." So before they could do it, Buddy Hackett threw himself in the pool and said, "Hey, fuck you guys."
Well, Tony Pellone's always been a great fighter, great crowd pleaser. He depends on terrific speed with both hands and his feet, and that's been apparent for the first 5 rounds. He's got that beautiful uppercut. Comes off the right, and he's got that ripping left
Kid
hook.
Perillo. Kid Perillo's the artist for Ring Magazine?
On the Not Flagship.
On the Nut Flagship. So we're talking about the 40s, 50s, 60s. Now, what were you saying?
I see Tony Pellone fight. You're related to Tony Pellone. Your father. Tough cookie. I see them fight many times at the old guard.
Teddy Brennan used to say, if they could beat Tony Pellone, then they're going to fight for the title. True to his word, I think Robinson had 5 title defenses in the welterweight division. 3 of them had to go through Tony Pellone first. Kid Gavilan, Charlie Fasari, and Chuck Taylor.
Who would you say his biggest wins were against?
His first guy to beat Charlie Fasari, when Charlie Fasari was like 46-0. First guy to beat Billy Graham. Billy Graham was 50-something-0 at the time. He also beat Bob Montgomery, who was lightweight champ. He beat Patty Young. He beat Joe Maselli. Beat Lulu Constantino. He beat a lot of guys. His fights with Kid Gavilan and Ike Williams were very close.
He was about 15, 16 years old when he started fighting. For some of us, it made a nervous wreck. I was worried, say, hope God, pray to God that he doesn't get hurt real big.
He was fighting men when he was 16. I mean, he fought Bob Montgomery when he was like 16 or 17, which is incredible, you know.
Unfortunately, I just think the timing wasn't right for his championships. Like, he beat Bob Montgomery. Bob Montgomery was a champ. He beat many champs, just weren't at the right time when they were fighting for championship belts.
He was a good fighter, a damn good fighter. And he had a lot of good friends that used to love him, especially Rocky Graziano. Lots of times they used to come to my house to eat. After the fights were over, whether you win or lost, or who won and who didn't, they all came over to eat. My mother and father used to cook for them.
One of the biggest prides my father talked about, and it was funny because it just stuck, was the Billy Graham victories. You know, Billy Graham was, I think, 52-0 when my uncle beat him and ended his streak. And then he beat him again, I think, 2 weeks later in another fight. And I think he finally lost 1 fight to him. And so they fought 3 fights, he won 2.
Billy Graham was as good a boxer as you could possibly be. Never got hurt, beat middleweights, welterweights, middleweights, lightweights. And Pellone was neck and neck with him. Actually, he's a little bit better than him, at least on 2 of the nights. Yeah. So you're talking about being on par with somebody who was considered the uncrowned champ. Tony once told me that Sugar Ray Robinson himself told him, hey, Tony, if they can beat you, I know I have a real fight in my hands. When Pellone was getting hot in New York, if anyone beat him, it was major news. So when Gavilan beat him, when Vince Foster beat him, those guys were propped up as a potential rival for Sugar Ray Robinson.
My uncle was 23 or 24 when he ended his career after a 9-year career with, like I said, about 100 fights. Think about that in this day and age, a 23-year-old with 100 fights. So I just think if he started his career at a normal age of 18, 19, there was no doubt in my mind he would have been a champion.
This is the neighborhood my mom and dad grew up in, and me later on. I moved there when I was 12, so I grew up here too. And you had Tommy Ryan. This is when my dad met Tommy Ryan when he found him shining shoes and beating people up. You know, all right, we're gonna pass the Minetta Tavern, which is a place that's been there forever. And they have photos of my dad inside.
I mean, they were an immigrant family. My grandparents came over from Naples and lived in Baltimore originally. That's where my uncle was born, in Baltimore. My father was the last brother born down in Baltimore, and allegedly, my grandfather was a bootlegger with the Kennedy family. Okay. And in the middle, one day they got told either you're going to jail for a while or you can get the hell out of Baltimore and never come back. And that's when they came up here to Greenwich Village.
They were such a big family that they had to break the wall down between 2 apartments, and they had 2 apartments. And the family was so big, one of his brothers lived with an aunt on another floor in the next building, and was raised as his son. Like they gave away kids, you know what I mean? But he wound up living a pretty good life, you know. He was the only one that went to college. My grandfather was the boss because he ran the family with an iron fist.
Basically, he would always say, "I give all my money to my old man." You know, I mean, and his old man got kind of rich off that money. You know, he went and bought restaurants in Coney Island, and his name is Aniello Neil, and he wanted all his sons to name their firstborn son Neil, and he got 6 of them to do it. And now I'm named Rocco after my mother's father, and he didn't like me because of that. They had a falling out, and so you know he kind of screwed my father by taking all his money and never giving him anything when he died. You know.
My father wins a fight.
I think this one was a big one. I think it was a $15,000 purse.
My father went to go split up the purse with his manager, Tommy Ryan, and my grandfather. When they started to split the money up, it was so much for someone, so much for someone, and then my father got the lowest amount. But at the end of the numbers, it was like $1,513.
So he said, Pop, 13's an unlucky number. Can you give me, can we change it?
Give me a couple of more dollars because 13's a bad number. My grandfather took a couple of dollars back instead.
And he went back down to 11 because my uncle asked for 15 and it went back down to 11.
And my father battled with him.
He was the breadwinner. He was a good part of the breadwinner of the family. My father told me a story how they only had, I think, 2 or 3 bedrooms, and they would sleep 3 or 4 in a bed, and they would sleep, head, toe, head, toe, head, toe. And as a matter of fact, my uncle, one fight had to be postponed because my uncle, I think Joey, wore shoes at night and busted his lip open before the fight, so he couldn't fight. He had to get stitches in his mouth. But yeah, I could definitely see my uncle's resentment towards his father in the sense that you're giving a $13,000 payday that's getting divvied up amongst the family, and then you're getting an equal cut of some job that you have that some other guy's working the same hours as you, but your $13,000 provided for this. Right. So was there resentment? I could definitely see it.
Yeah, he was like the Don of the family. He really was like a, he thought of himself as a gangster kind of,
This is your grandfather.
Yeah. He got rich off the places in Coney Island, and then bought buildings and houses and properties, and he never gave my father ended up with nothing from him, which always really hurt my father. He really didn't like that at all.
My grandfather, when he first brought the family from Baltimore to New York, he used to travel from street fair to street fair, like selling seafood, soft shell crabs. And when my father began fighting and there was influx of money into the family, my grandfather wanted to invest it in something solid. So he started to rent out spots in Coney Island to sell clams, seafood, pizza. My grandfather rented from, I guess the big landowners, their names were McCullough. They sound like cowboys from the 1800s. But they were the landlords. There was a place across the street called the Vesuvius restaurant, and at first he just took a little corner spot to sell clams out of it, and then eventually rented out the entire place. And then they changed the name from the Vesuvius to Tony Pellone's restaurant.
My father and my family, we moved away when I was younger. We probably moved away when I was about 5 years old. I remember coming as a little kid and just being in awe of how busy the bar was, the hustle and bustle. Everyone it was like Cheers. Everyone knew each other. I remember also how fast they were at opening clams and they just moved so quick. Everything was just smooth and moving. And coming back when I was in my teens with my father would always get frog legs. And every time I come here, and I just had a pound of frog legs today, I always have a pound of, eat the frog legs because in memory of my father who passed away when he was 52. The memories I have were, like I said, coming here, being a little kid in the thing, going next door to John Dorman's candy store, getting a candy apple, having some raw clams.
This here is is the entrance and exit from the subway stations that all come to Coney Island. 5, 6, the D train, the F train, the Q train, they all end up here in Coney Island. We used to call it Coney Island. Years ago, the conductors at the end of the line would say, Coney Island, last stop, all off, because it was the last stop. We had a bar here called the Hollywood Bar. It was over here where it says Visitors Center and the Dunkin' Donuts now, because they remodeled the station about 20 years ago. And they actually gave my Uncle Carmine, who was the last owner of it, first dibs on whether he wanted to keep a bar open, but his kids were through college, he decided to retire, so he never took the offer. I was born in '49, okay? And Coney Island was still like a bustling, exciting place. It was, I mean, at one time, Coney Island was for gambling, prostitution. It was the Las Vegas of America. You know, in the 1920s and the 30s or whatever like that. You know, of course, many movies ended here. There's one interesting story about this station before it was remodeled. If you ever see the movie, 9.5 Weeks with Kim Basinger and Mickey Rourke, they come walking down here and they throw something. I think she throws a hat or something at a sign, and the sign says Pellone's Bar and Grill. But it's not here anymore because this whole thing's been filled in, and the sign used to be here, you know?
You can see that in the movie?
Yeah, you can see it. You got to really know what you're looking for, but you can see that in the movie. My last uncle to have this place, he was, even my Uncle Carmine's kids would say he was a lazy guy, right? And Carmine would sit there and he would keep an eye on the bartender. You know, he would manage things going. And sitting in that chair, you know, he doped the horses in that chair, read the paper. And the last time I worked here was in the 80s. And I'm working behind the bar one time, and an elderly gentleman comes in, he orders a drink. He starts to tell me a story about how he just came back from prison. He was in prison for 8 years. And he came back here first because this is the last place he came to before he surrendered himself to go. And he said, you know, 8 years ago I surrendered myself to prison. And that man was sitting there. He says, and he's still sitting there. It's a true story, you can't make it up. The big place was here. The Vesuvius, Tony Pellone's restaurant, had also had that name. And there was the alleyway, then there was Playland. Playland was, you know, it had the booth where you could take a picture with your girlfriend, and it had skee ball and things of that nature. And the original place was on that corner. Right where that fence is, it was that corner, you know? That was the original pizza place, all torn down.
Greco goes in first, pounds 3 rights to the rib, and takes 2 rights to the body in return from Tony Pellone. Now referee Eddie Joseph gets them apart. Pellone's back with 2 left jabs to the chin. A short left hook on the mouth by Tony Pellone. Greco on top of him, takes a short right to the chin. Greco can't seem to get in to use that right hand again.
10-round bout between Johnny Greco of Montreal and Tony Pellone of Greenwich Village, New York, here in Madison Square Garden. Harry Ballo is picking up the blanks of the 3 officials, the referee Eddie Joseph, the judges George Lecron and Joe Agnello.
Score 6 rounds for Pellone, 4 rounds for Greco. Referee Eddie Joseph scores 3 rounds for Pellone, 7 rounds for Greco. Judge Joe Agnello scores 6 rounds for Pellone. Is Tony Pellone.
The neighborhood loved him. He had a lot of good friends on the block on Thompson Street. Chin, I think they lived on Thompson Street. Chin, I think Chin got married.
His mob connections were just, you know, just the connections to the mob, and he didn't brag about it. It was just something that he grew up around. Like his manager was Tommy Ryan.
But my father was a shoe shine boy.
What was the street? What street?
Oh, Thompson Street. Thompson Street between Houston and Bleecker. He was very proud of his shoe shining because, whatever, fast and, whatever the technique is, he was proud of it. I remember him talking about it like he was proud of it. And that's how he met Tommy Ryan, because one time he was in a street fight and he's shining Tommy Ryan's shoes. And Tommy Ryan said, where'd you get the bruise, And he says, well, I was in a street fight. And basically, Tommy Ryan said to him, you want to make money fighting? And that's how, they got the ball rolling.
Describe who Tommy Ryan was.
Well, Tommy Ryan was, he was an entrepreneur. It's funny because I thought about this question, okay? And I mean that in a sense, like he's an entrepreneur, like he was a fight manager and I guess what you call a wheeler dealer or somebody who could get things done. Well documented, like he was in the record business. Tommy James and the Shondells. Tommy James wrote a book about how he was so involved with roulette records and other music and entertainment venues. And he was, what's the word? He was alleged to be connected to the Genovese family. But when you say who was he to, that's interesting. He was accessible, but he was always that successful person in your life that's everywhere, so really that's what he was to my father after the boxing career ended.
What was his real name?
Thomas Eboli.
The fighters used to come up there and train at either Long Pond Inn or at Brown's Hotel. Whenever Tony was having a fight, or even Rocky Castellani, they used to come and stay at our house for a couple of reasons. One, my father would keep them out of the city, away from distraction. And two, he knew that they were getting their steak every night because my mother was cooking it for them. My mother used to cook liver and then wring the juice out of it so that they could drink the juice, which would give them the protein, without getting the cholesterol from the solid meat. So I was about 6, 7 years old, 8 years old, and I remember Tony living with us and even entertained his fiancée, Lucy, who later on became his wife. Lucy was a lot of fun. She couldn't have been more than 18, 19 years old. Tony was, he was a fine addition to the house. And he was very astute and religious about his training. And my father used to treat him more like a son, I think, than like a contract of his. No, they were best friends. She was his best friend.
Yeah, Tommy. Tommy was a very well-respected guy in this neighborhood. Everybody knew him. He actually had a club down on Jones Street, right down the block here.
Other than being business partners, it seemed like they were, or partners in a fight game, it seemed like they were very friendly.
Yeah, I mean, he was the best man at their wedding. It's pretty important.
One of the few times my father actually stopped and opened up to me about something. I guess she wanted to talk, and this is where he was. Him and other guys and were shoeshine boys in the spot. Actually, the thing is, they used to fight for the spots. This is the spot where the partnership between Tommy Ryan and Tony Pellone actually began.
We are at the site of the Triangle Social Club, which was Vinny the Chin's favorite spot. He would come in and out of here in his bathrobe every so often. And when we played wiffle ball across the street, guys would go, it was really cool having the guy, having him around, Everybody respected him. The neighborhood was better, it was safer, a lot safer. And as you can see, it's now a tea and spice company. Him and my dad grew up together. They went to school at St. Anthony's. They both lived in the same neighborhood, obviously, and they both wanted to be boxers.
They were best of friends. From what I got from their best friends, my mother says they introduced them. All the kids used to go to this place called the Marcini Club, the neighborhood playground. It's no longer there. It's called, okay? And I remember my mom, they were kids that all grew up, and my mom said that, Chin says, my mother didn't like my father at first. She thought he was, smart ass, whatever a woman thinks of a guy at first impression. And Chin says, what's the matter? You don't like my friend? My friend likes you. You don't like my friend? So, whatever. They got together. But they were kids together.
My father had a problem with some big guy, tall guy, about 6'6" something. So Chin would told him, bust his fucking head. He goes, just bust his fucking head. And my father walked away and he goes, the guy's like 6'4", So he had enough sense not to try it with that guy.
They were friends to a point where like they were almost like brothers.
I got to meet him a few times.
What was he like?
He was cool. He looked like Elvis Presley, believe it or not. Good-looking guy. His brother Lewis one time presented me with a trophy. I won MVP on my basketball team, and when he seen my name, Pellone, he goes, "Is this Tony Pellone's son?" He made this whole speech about my father being the pride of the neighborhood and all that.
Like I met Chin a couple of times, all right, and now there was people in the neighborhood used to have a fish stand in the feast. So I would occasionally be asked to go there and work a few nights opening clams. Chin came up to me and he said, "You look like your father." And I said to him, "You look like Elvis Presley," I said to him. And everybody around him went like he laughed. Even his daughter told him he looked like Elvis Presley. I later found.
I remember Vinny used to be in the papers all the time in the 80s, right? Walking around in his robe and talking to himself. So I remember asking Pellone, because I was aware of the fact that they were from the same block. And I remember asking him, "Hey, Tony, are you still in touch with Vinny the Chin?" And Tony told me, "What the hell for, right? He's doing his thing, I'm doing my thing." And I said, "No, I'm just curious. I'm not asking for anything." And then Tony said, "Well, you need a favor? Let me know if you need a favor, all right? But just know you'll be paying it back. Your children be paying it back. Your children's children be paying it back." So I said, "Nah, I don't need a favor." I never brought it back up. But I did ask him. I said, "Tony, is Vinny the Chin really crazy?" And Tony looked at me the way I'm looking at the camera and said, "How should I know? I'm not a psychiatrist."
My dad had so many angles. He did so many different projects. He helped a lot of people. He managed a singer. He did a boxing club. He did so many things. I mean, he ran this gym called the Ave Maria Youth Center, and he had a boxing ring, and a bunch of the kids in the neighborhood used to hang out there. Just his whole idea was to get them to not want to go out and do drugs. They just come out a place to hang out where you didn't have to go do drugs. Sort of like the Morricini. I guess he might have got the idea from that, but it was pretty cool for a while. My dad had a job at the docks, working on the docks, dock worker. He worked for a trucking company called St. Johnsbury. He had a lot of different things. He did a lot of different things in his post-boxing life.
I work as a Teamster, and I work for different companies every now and then. And I work for this one company for a couple of days. So next week comes Thursday, you're supposed to get your check. I call the guy up, "Can I come by, pick up the check?" I get no answer, nobody answers. Call up a couple times, "We'll give it to you next week. I'll give it to you the following week." I called up about 10 times. Now, one day I was doing a job in Staten Island, and I was in the truck, and I said, "You know what, there's the company that owes me the money. Let me go and just walk in and see if I could get, the money that's owed to me." I walk in, and the guy who owns the place, his father was there. So I walked in, I said, "Oh, Vinny owes me money, I've worked a couple days," the whole story. He says, "Oh, Vinny's not here. We're gonna get you your money. Just give me your name and number." And in my head, I'm saying, I'm gonna give him my name and number. I called every day for the last 2 weeks. I'm not getting paid, I know what's going on. So I said, "All right, let me give him my name and number." So I said, "Neil Pellone," give him my number. He goes, "Neil Pellone, you related to ToughTony Pellone?" I said, yeah, that's my uncle. I was, oh, I know your uncle for years. I worked with him down on the docks and this and that, and it gave me a whole big story. And next thing you know, he writes me out a check for the 2 days, and he didn't even take the taxes out.
He had a dream to have like a youth club to teach kids how to box, or have, just somewhere to go.
So I told him, I'm looking for, someone told me to look you up. They say you train, you're a trainer now. And he said, no, I closed the gym a couple of years ago. And I was like, all right, well, it's nice to meet you. And I'm walking out, and then he says, hey, what's your old man say about you fighting, right? And my father had just died like 2 months before. So I told him the grass hasn't even grown yet on his cemetery. And he said, give me a second. And he came out a few seconds later with a little hat on and his jacket. He said, let's go to the gym. And then I seen him 2 or 3 times a week after that for about a year and a half. So the first time he takes me to the gym, they used to always say that no one should jump in the ring your first day, right? You should work out, they should teach you the basics. But Pellone was old school. You got in the ring, and then he would figure out what you needed to work on, right? So it caught me a little by surprise, because the first day we go to the gym, he says, hey, you're gonna spar next. I said, spar? I thought you're not supposed to spar on the first day. And he said, well, we don't have to spar. We can go outside and suck on some lollipops if you want. So I jumped in the ring and I sparred.
He called it the Ave Maria Youth Club and stuff like that. And kids would come and they would learn to box, or they'd just hang out or whatever. And one time a priest from the local parish came down, and he said to my father, he says, you're a priest, I'm not a priest. And that was like the biggest compliment my father ever took upon himself. Like, like that a priest would compliment him for doing a job that a priest should be doing.
Joe DiMaggio was a godlike figure. So for this godlike figure to recognize, Tony Pellone from Greenwich Village was tremendous.
My father stands next to Joe DiMaggio for a photo, and he says, Joe, he says, I grew up a Yankee fan, and I've always been. And Joe DiMaggio said to him, he says, Tony, I remember you. Joe DiMaggio almost like recited my father's whole career record to him. And he says, and you're the guy, you're the kid who supported your family, so on and so forth. And my father was like flabbergasted, that DiMaggio would even be, cognizant of, conscious of his existence, He
used to go to all his fights. And if you look at that picture of them together, you never see Joe DiMaggio smile ever. He's smiling in that picture.
He drank a lot in the 50s, through the 50s, okay? And, he would be out of work, in work. But, the thing was, he always had work because he knew so many people that could get him a job anywhere. Trucking, the docks, a bar, whatever. He could have worked anywhere. In the early 60s, I think he feels like he reached bottom, or whatever his bottom was. I don't remember what it was. But he joins Alcoholics Anonymous. He, part because of his notoriety and because of his interest in it, he became very involved. And he would become a popular guest speaker all over the tri-state area. He would take me sometimes to open meetings because nobody was invited to closed meetings.
He would take me to AA meetings with him, and he was great when he was sober. He really was.
When I was a kid, like I said, we moved upstate for a while, and he would come up and spend, I think, 2 or 3 weeks in the summer or whatever time, and he would explain to me how said to my father, maybe I was just here hustling, but he would dry out for one month out of every year. He would take or not drink at all, and I just remember that, him coming up, and he would tell us stories, and me being in awe of being in my uncle's presence.
At one point, he became very, very involved, where he had his own club meeting in Coney Island. In Coney Island, there was almost like a section there that was almost like a Bowery, because Coney Island's like the end of the line, it was like so he would get Bowery bums and get them jobs at my uncle's restaurant, and then my uncle would give them work. He would set them up in a room. He would tell them, look, you put your 26 weeks in with me, and then all winter you could go on unemployment. He would set up a life for them.
I've been waiting a couple of years to make this speech. I'm going to take you back to the 1940s for a little while. We're going back to the 1940s, the so-called golden era of boxing. Tony Pellone was a contender for a long time. In many of those years, #1 contender by Ring Magazine and the National Boxing Association's leading logical contender for many years. Back in those days, headlining Madison Square Garden was as good as being a champion. And for the last half of the 1940s, nobody headlined Madison Square Gardens more times than Tony Pellone. Long overdue. And I'm very honored to present the award to his sons and his nephews, Neil, Rocco, and Neil.
And the turnout from my family, I mean, I couldn't believe it. Everybody showed up. You know, it was really nice. It was really nice. People that showed up, like my Aunt Susie showed up. She never goes anywhere. Right. She showed up. Right. You know, she hadn't gone to a wedding or anything for like 20 years. And she even had her nail painted with a picture of him on it.
We brought over 50 Pellones here today. This isn't just for the people here tonight. My uncle came from a family of 12. So besides his parents, this is for his brothers Tony, Johnny, Carmine, Vinny, Boo Boo, Nikki, Sally, Frankie, his sister Anna Marie, and his youngest brother Joey. I left out one sibling. She's 90 years old and she's here tonight. My Aunt Susie. I want everybody, stand up for my Aunt Susie. Give her a round of applause.
I felt really good that the whole family turned out. And I thought my father would be very proud. And also I'm glad that it turned out the way it did with my I don't know who put my grandkids on the stage, but somebody put them up there, and it's something they'll never forget.
How do you think your dad would have felt?
I thought he would have. First of all, he would have tried to talk me out of it. He would have said, "No, I said, you go. I don't want to go." Yeah, that's it. Yeah, he would have said that, but he'd be very proud. He'd be almost as happy as Joe DiMaggio and the priest. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Who are you?